Hello everyone, welcome back to the Artless Dialogue. It's me, Saud, with Ash Mohammed, and this is Career Questions. In this segment, we listen to our viewers, our audience, we take questions and we try our best to answer them. So, Ash, the question for this week is, how does work-life balance change as you go up the career ladder? Does it get better or does it get worse? I think you're better placed to answer this, Ash, so why
Cool,
don't you?
excellent. Thanks. It's a really good question, and it's an interesting one because there's a lot of subjectivity in there. So probably first just to break that down because one, it talks about up the career ladder. So assumption is we're talking about career progression, probably in a more standard blue collar office kind of corporate type place, and then it talks about does it get better or worse? So again, a better, I'm assuming, means you've got a better work-life balance, i.e., you enjoy the life bit as equally, or if not more than the work bit. So I just thought I'd help clarify that because sometimes people have different definitions of that. But I think it's tricky. It's tricky, Sal. I'd say it goes up and down is probably the answer. So if I think when I first kind of started my career. And when you're trying to make a name for yourself and you're trying to raise your visibility, at the same time, you're doing a lot of learning. And that might be formal education through the role, or it might be you're trying to learn about multiple elements of the role you're trying to do. So there's quite a big spike. So I certainly found when I first started working, and that was just about before Sophia was born. So slightly different mindset, I've been kind of a wee one to look after. I'd say work pretty much was my balance. There was very little of the life bit. I think I spent most of the time, many hours at work, and then took a lot of the work home with me, which included weekends. Now, was that bad or good? It was a conscious choice. So I didn't kind of feel forced into it. So, and kind of therefore it didn't necessarily feel like a bad thing. I think where it got difficult was when Sophia was born and I still wanted to kind of continue with the progression. Suddenly then, you have a shift, and then suddenly you're finishing at 5-6 o'clock and then getting home for 7 o'clock suddenly becomes a problem because you're then not having that quality time, with her when she's little, and you're missing that. So suddenly then work-life balance shifts, and what was very acceptable to me before suddenly becomes difficult.
Yeah.
Now the thing I found, and maybe it's me rather than other people, is you kind of create this kind of mindset that that's the pace you operate at, and so it's hard to slow the momentum of that. Because that's the way I was operating, because I had a kind of a view in my head where I wanted my career to progress. Yeah. And for my career to progress to where I wanted it, I needed to sustain that pace. So there was definitely a period of time where my work-life balance was out of sync with what made me kind of comfortable and happy. And it was quite a challenging time because I needed to put the time and effort in to progress the career, but at the same time, I wasn't getting as much downtime. I wasn't getting enough time with, family, etc. So it was a challenge. So my work-life balance kind of shifted to work, but not enjoying that balance. Whereas prior to that, it was much more of a choice. This time it felt a little bit like I still had a choice, but the choice was now not as enjoyable because now my choice was slightly different in the sense I wanted to achieve the outcome to progress my career because I wanted to set up a future for my family. So that was the goal, but it was still much more challenging. You kind of then start feeling guilty.
The cost to it changed.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I was, one of my kind of mentors told me about this kind of 4-grid box, and he said there's career, there's personal development, there's family, and there's you. So if you think you throw a box and, four things in there. Now, if you draw a circle with a bit of string and you put that in the middle, and if you pull the career bit, it's going to pull away from the other 3 boxes. because that's just the way it works. So if you think about it, say you're in your current job, you're very established, you know what you're doing, and then you decide, right, I'm going to progress my career. So then you're going to go, well, to progress my career, I need to raise my visibility. I need to take on additional work. You might need to kind of train yourself up in a certain thing. So however way you look at it, it's going to pull away from you, as in time for yourself, because you're now suddenly eating into time for yourself because you've still got to do your day job, or it pulls away from your family time because you're going, well, I'm going to skip the evening meal with the family this evening because I've got so much work to do because I've got this big presentation. I want to smash it out of the park. Or it sometimes pulls away from your development in your role because you're focused now on the next role, etc. So the point that we're kind of making to me by drawing that image is the length of the string is the length of the string. Right? You can't create time and you can't create more space than there is there. I mean, you kind of can with tools and stuff, but it's finite.
There's limit,
There's limit. And I think probably the first few years, it wasn't very conscious that I was doing that. I didn't understand that there was that finite limit. And so I was trying to do all of it, which became very exhausting. And at the same time, you're constantly in your uncomfortable space. And when you're in your uncomfortable space, you're learning a lot, but it's also, by definition, uncomfortable. So it's less enjoyable. But then I think, it got to a position where I kind of made a conscious decision to shift that work-life balance and to go, right, actually, when it came to sort of 4 or 5 o'clock, that was me. I was logging off and I was going to spend time with the family, and that was my priority. And so I made a very conscious decision to shift that. Now, it didn't change my drive. It didn't change my need to go and progress my career, but I probably became a bit more patient. And I suddenly didn't want to kind of go, right, I want to do this in 2 years. I could do this in 3 years, but be a bit more sensible about it. And I think it took probably a bit of, self-evaluation, self-reflection, and a bit of patience building, but also that kind of self-belief and confidence that I can do it in that time. And I don't suddenly need to kind of run 1,000 miles an hour to achieve it, which sometimes you feel that way because you feel you're running out of time. So I think that, work-life balance does go up and down. And I think it does depend on what you're trying to achieve, as well as, what's around you.
I think you summed up quite well that at the end of the day, it's your choice and it has to align with your goals. If you want to go up, accelerate at a good pace, then you'll have to put the focus on work a bit more. And if that's not your priority, then you can maintain a better work-life balance. I think that's a good point about choices that you make. If I'd add some, I'd noticed that, as you mentioned in the beginning of your career, it's good to learn more and give work more time when you don't have other things around you in the start of your career, because that sets you up with a good foundation to move on in a managerial role or even further. But the second thing I've noticed is that as you progress, you get more responsibility. And with that responsibility comes less of a choice, more of a responsibility to spend more time at work or ensure that everything goes well. And I guess it depends on your team and your management style on whether it positively affects your work-life balance or negatively does that. And there's something else I had in mind. And as you go up, your responsibilities do increase, but at the same time, so does your control over your schedule. The meetings you set, you can actually control when, where, and I think that gives you some opportunity to, make better choices as well.
Yeah, no, I won't disagree, and I think that there's a sweet spot, which is the sweet spot for everyone, and everyone is very different in terms of where that sweet spot is. And you kind of know when you're there because you're kind of challenged and you're pushed, but you're not having to kind of run in the evenings and weekends in terms of work wise to keep up with that, and or you're not doing that and finding that a challenge, finding that difficult, and then going, and you kind of know that sweet spot. But you're right. I think when you do get into much more senior roles, as much as you do have control, there's also a hell of a lot more that's out with your control. Because suddenly now you're very visible. There's a ton of accountability on your shoulders. There's external pressures, whatever that is. If you're suddenly a CEO, you've got shareholders to worry about, you've got regulators to worry about, and what you can't say is, well, actually, I want a quiet week this week, so I don't want to talk to you guys. So I think there is a sweet spot. However, I think as seniority goes up the way, I think then, your time becomes much more spread thinner across a whole different area. And suddenly the scope of your responsibility grows. And suddenly now you've got 10 different people who are wanting to talk to you. Then your scope grows again. And I think I always found that challenging when I moved up roles, which is that stretching into that new skin. And it's the way we kind of we learn, and I think if I could create a training course, it'll be how you better prepare people for career progression, because you kind of go, right, say grade 1 is the bottom and grade 10 is the highest. You're in grade 1, you learn how to do grade 1 really well, because that's what you do, right? And you go, I'm brilliant at grade 1, so I'm ready for grade 2. So we've taught you how to fill 100% of your time by doing grade 1 really well. Then you go into grade 2. Now, suddenly, you're probably doing 2 or 3 times the amount of work in terms of scope of work as you were in grade 1. But what we've taught you to do is approach it like a grade 1 person would do. So suddenly now you're trying to do 300% of the work in a grade 1 way of doing it. And so no wonder everyone struggles. Suddenly it becomes, you're stretched really thin because you're trying to do everything and you've got no chance. And then it takes you 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years to kind of go, right, I'm in grade 2 zone now, got it, nailed it. And then you go to grade 3 and repeat. And if anything, the gap is like an inverted, triangle where your accountability spread gets much wider the higher you go. And so that ability to stretch and grow and suddenly change your mindset completely is so hard. It's so hard. And it's like every step, but we don't necessarily prepare ourselves. You're not necessarily prepared for that jump in that way. And that's one of the biggest challenges, which is why the point about work-life balance, because you go into that role and suddenly for 6 months to 12 months, your work-life balance goes out of the window. And I've literally experienced it in every single role I've moved up into, where for 6 months, I'm very conscious, 6 to 12 months, right, this is going to be chaos. But as long as you go in there kind of consciously, it's much more manageable. As long as you've got you see some progression. But it is difficult when you're progressing your career and trying to maintain an even work-life balance. The two kind of are not particularly compatible because they do require you to constantly go out of your comfort zone. But yeah.
I think you're right. As scope increases, as you go up each level, you're stretched more. And I think, as you said, you take some time to figure it out. You have to go into it consciously. And I believe how you manage things and how good of a team you have around you, I think that makes a lot of difference to how much time you can spend with your family at the end of the day.
It does. Yeah. And you're right. And this kind of goes back into that, if your work-life balance is important, then you need to then invest the time in your team.
Yes.
And as soon as you invest the time in your team, that's probably going to take more time for a period of time than you would do if you just kind of keep the wheels going. So there's always a kind of it's back to that circle with the string. You go, right, I'm going to develop my team, right? If you develop your team, you slow down your career, or you slow down or you impacts your family. You cannot do all of it. And I think where sometimes people will struggle with this is when they do try to do all of it. And then you stretch that string, eventually it's going to tear. And that's when, people suffer because they're trying to do career, they're trying to do family, and they're running around trying to do all of it. And you go, you've got to find yourself a nice balance that's comfortable for you.
Sounds good. think that's a good answer to the question, Ash.
Excellent.
And I hope that answers your question as well. As usual, please drop in any questions regarding career, professional, personal development, and we'll try our best to address them in our videos every week. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And if you want similar content, check out our other videos.